Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. Of course, every Monday the TTPS join us on Now. And this morning we welcome back Inspector Michelle Lewis. Good morning to you, Inspector.
Good morning to the both of you and good morning Trinidad and Tobago. It's
How are we doing on this beautiful Monday morning?
I am well. How are you doing?
Sleepy.
Mm-hmm. You're sleepy, hence the reason for sipping on the coffee. No?
Hey now. Hey now.
This morning we are continuing with the topic of bullying.
Mm-hmm.
I know last week we gave quite a mouthful and we just want to continue a bit on that just to share some more information with the public, of course.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to look at two areas in terms of, we're looking at the bully aspect, the person who's actually the bully, and what are the consequences. So what a parent or a teacher or someone with responsibility can do. And the flip side of that, or the adverse side of that, of course, is where the law kicks in.
Right.
Right?
So let's start with the school.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's start with the school and the parent, because the home, as we know, is the most important foundation for the child, right? So, for example, when a parent, or a teacher rather, calls in a parent and says to that parent or guardian that your child is bullying another child, right? More than likely it would have happened more than one occasion for the child to actually, for the parent to actually call in the teacher to call the parent at that time. So as a parent, one of the things that you can do with your child at home is to have conversation with that child to find out what is the situation, what is frustrating you, what is causing you to act out, what is causing you to lash out. Even though your home may not be the perfect home, it is good to identify what is causing the trigger in the child. So when you as a parent or guardian have that conversation with that child, you would be able to decide whether the child would need further social support through counseling, whether it is that you can deal with it at home. Maybe it could be that you can ask an uncle or the father of the child or somebody else, a bigger brother or sister, to intervene to help to groom that child in a particular way where it helps, right? So that is the first way that we look at getting to the getting a solution to the problem where a child is a bully, trying to change the behavior of the child.
I feel like there's a lot of assumptions being made because, for starters, in my little experience on this earth, I've realized that most of the children who are bullies, they come from homes where that behavior is normal. So I don't see a parent who behaves like that saying to the child, well, what's triggering you? That is a rational thinking parent, somebody who doesn't realize that their actions are affecting the child. And the child not going to say, well, mommy, the way you just behave is the way I just behave. No child going to say that to their parents. So how do we then find that mitigation, that point in between? Because it's like, all right, so yet I agree with you that the home is the foundation of where we need to fix these problems, right? But if the home is where it actually is sourcing from, then how do we even get a parent to realize that the things I am doing may be affecting this child and making them behave like me?
So children right now are more vocal than you think, right? To be quite honest, right? And so if the parent finds the opportunity, the timing to have the conversation with the child will tell the parent. Now, there are parents or guardians in a household, be it male or female, mother or father, where the circumstances is not to the best. It's not that they like the situation. For example, it may be a house or home where domestic violence is taking place.
Right.
It may not be that the mother is happy about it. But when she hears how it's affecting the child, she may look to do something about it. So you cannot just assume that every situation, yes, we're making some assumptions, but we also know that the situation at home can be very dynamic. It could be one where the parent is deliberate and very hostile, and it could be one where there is some level of abuse that everybody is not in support of, right? So with those scenarios, you would be able to recognize that depending on what it is, there is the intervention in relation to family. And there's also so not necessarily persons from the household, and there is also the intervention in relation to social workers, counselors.
Right.
So either through Ministry of Community or Social Development, you have the mediation center as well, which is free. And then through the school, there are also social workers, right, and welfare officers. Through the TTPS also, we have that. So we first look at that way to treat with the problem. And as mentioned last week, we also have the community police that will do the intervention.
Right.
And that is the first area that we want to look at. Yes.
And now I hear you completely, and I understand. I also hear what Rokas is saying as well, because it's not to use the term idealistic, because we have so many different situations that do take place, what we learn in the home, what we bring out into school, and so forth. And there are also other things that need to be taken into consideration. So, for example, yes, we have these social workers that can come in and have the conversation, but then what about situations where a child is being bullied? They go and tell the teacher goes and tells the parent, and the parent is either not interested in getting involved or is first to assume that there's nothing wrong with my child. There's either something wrong with you, there's something wrong with the system. How do we find a way to mitigate all these things and actually see how we can start to bring change into a situation?
So your first manner of dealing with it would be first to get an intervention, which is either through the family structure, the school, involving the community police officers in the station district. And if those don't work, then you go the way of the law.
Right.
Now, we know that the law has been established where persons fail to go in a particular alignment. The law is corrected, is implemented to make sure that you fall in line with what the society expects you to do. Right? So in Trinidad and Tobago, the age of criminal responsibility is the age of 7. Right? 7 years old. So a child, 8 years, 9 years, 11 years, can be charged before the open court for a criminal offense. And a criminal offense can be an assault, it could be harassment, it could be assault occasioning bodily harm, it could be assault occasioning a wound. And depending on and harassment, right? So depending on the criminal offense, if it is that the intervention is not working and the situation, because remember you also have a child who is being bullied, who we also want to prevent from depression and suicide, worst case scenario. So that where the parent of a child is hostile himself or herself, and the child gets that comfort in the fact that my parent or my guardian is of like manner, then the law kicks in.
Right.
And persons can be charged. So when this morning the TTPS says that there are 2 ways in treating with a person who is a bully, one is in relation to an intervention and the other is in relation to putting the person before the court. Right? So we do have in Trinidad the Children's Court who would look at different areas in which they treat with it. But the TTPS will charge persons, children, who are abusing other children physically and otherwise. The law provides for us to do that. And so it's important to parents to understand that not because your child is in a school uniform, that it mitigates your child from criminal responsibility or liability.
I'm just curious as to how that fixes the problem. Because you still have children who would be bullied. You would still have, you now end up with more criminals in a criminal system. So they might end up in juvenile or detention or situations like that. But does it fix the problem?
Well, it would not happen like that, because the children court is set up differently.
Right.
The children court is set up in the first instance where they have actually like children being adjudicators in relation to certain matters before it actually goes to worst case scenario, right? Because it is a criminal offense, before it actually goes to worst case scenario. So it goes before the judge or a master in the children's court, and depending on the situation, the master will determine how that matter is going to be dealt with in the best interest of the child. So that it may be that the child would require some community service. It may be that some intervention or social work is necessary, as well as in the home of the child. But on the police side of it, we will have to do what we have to do, lest we be held liable for not doing what we're supposed to do. And we do our part of it and let the court do the other part of it.
So, as Rokas would have mentioned, so after, let's say this court takes place, the system takes place, process, what happens to these children? Where do they go?
When you say where they go?
Well, where do they go? I mean, once you go to court, 9 out of 10 times the first thing you think is you go into some sort of juvenile detention center, some sort of rehabilitation. So what happens? What's the process afterwards that's going to rehabilitate these children?
All right. So the children going into another type of institution may not necessarily be this case, because remember it would take some investigation by Children's Authority involving the TTPS and the Children's Court, right? So you have what we call the children in need of care, right? And so, depending on the situation, the child may not necessarily be taken out of their home. It would mean that some social work intervention will take place there, as well as visit from the TTPS to the home of the child together with Children's Authority. So the child may not necessarily be removed from the home. In having worked with Children's Authority before, one of the first things, but the last thing that they do is to remove the child from the home. Right? If it is, for example, the assault is taking place there,
Then they would.
then they would charge the person who is in the home, and that person would have to leave the home. Right? That is how the law goes. So let's say, because most of the cases in Trinidad and Tobago, it's the male that is the perpetrator, right? In whatever type of offense, the fact. So in those cases, they would charge the person, the male person in the house, and that person, there would be a protection order and stuff like that against the, right? So where, for example, there's domestic violence taking place that is causing the child to behave a particular way and then to react in school, then they would guide the parent or the mother, as in most cases, as we have seen by fact, how to go about protecting and securing her family. Right? So the child may not necessarily be removed from the home. Right? But we want persons to understand that there are consequences to your action, right? And not because you may, yes, you may want to get some attention, but it's important for parents to understand that there are consequences to the action. And so you must ensure, as a parent, that your child is behaving well in school and able to socialize with other children. All right?
Definitely. Well, Inspector Michelle Lewis, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I feel like this is a conversation that is going to continue as well going into next week. The TTPS On Now this morning on the Now Morning Show. Stay tuned, because next week, Monday, Inspector will be back and we may continue the conversation. But for now, go and get some coffee and get ready, because after this break, it's time for your birthdays.
I am all shocked to know